Lindsay spent the last decade writing, editing, and building audiences for some of the world's largest brands in digital media. Before joining Fortune as an executive, she was the deputy managing editor at CNBC Make It, love CNBC Make It, and served as the editorial lead on CNBC Select. She worked for more than 5 years at Refinery29, where she launched the Work and Money section and ran Money Diaries, a franchise that garnered an international cult following. Lindsay is the author of Money Diaries, Everything You Want to Know About Your Finances and Everyone Else's. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
I am so excited to hear about your journey and what you've learned, especially with, growing Money Diaries. But just to start off, do you mind telling us the origins of how Money Diaries began and how you kind of decided, this is what we're going to do?
Yeah, it's funny. It's such a inside baseball story. We actually realized that dollar signs did really well in the headlines of the stories we were writing. And I worked for this really brilliant woman, Jessica Chow, and she ran a team where they just experimented with new franchise formats to figure out how to bring in new audiences. And she was like, what if we did a money diary? And I was like, I don't know, Jess, that might be boring. But that's the beautiful thing about the internet, right? You can try pretty much anything. And a diary is a very inexpensive content idea. So she found a friend who was willing to do it. And she brought it back to me and the executive editor, Caroline, who I worked with closely. And it was just it was sort of an interesting week in this young woman's life. And then we got to Saturday night and she was out on a date and she said, my date and I did Coke, but I don't know how much it cost because he paid for it. And I was like, oh, wait, this is going to be really interesting. And it just sort of took off from there. It was really funny when we published the first one, somebody in the comments was like, Refinery29 has jumped the shark. This is never going to be successful. But it really almost caught on instantaneously. And we were very lucky at the time. We had a great product team at Refinery29, and they helped work on the back end of our content management system to create a program where people could just fill it out, and we would get a dozen a day of entries to publish. So it was incredible.
I mean, I don't think it ever existed before. Your team coined almost the term Money Diaries.
Yeah, it was a financial concept that I was familiar with and that people had actually recommended as a way to really consider how you're spending. And it is a really good exercise. I tell people, even if you didn't want to submit it to Refinery, it is a great way to sort of look at how you spend over a week.
I completely agree. And, even now, as time has gone on, people will do what I spend in a week as an Instagram reel or what I do in a week in New York City. And we're all just so interested. Why do you think people were scared to talk about money before? Or even still now, to be honest?
I think people are always scared to talk about it for a lot of reasons. We hold a lot of personal feelings about money that we get from childhood, from society. So I think that there's always that sort of uncomfortable feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that we have a lot of judgment of other people and how they spend their money. You see that very much with Money Diaries commenters. So that brings a level of fear for us sharing that we're going to have that judgment reflected back at us.
Do you think it's something we are born with or something that is kind of molded around us?
I think it's molded around us. I don't think it's something we're born with. I think it's definitely society telling us, don't do this. And it's interesting. I have an 8-year-old son and he asks a lot of money questions and they're really hard to navigate. And there's a lot of let's not talk about this in public.
Really?
Yeah.
What does he ask?
Oh, how much is in my bank account? And
you're we're in the subway.
Yeah. It's we're not talking about this right now. So it's really interesting to have to figure out how to navigate your own hangups as you're raising children or educating women in both things that I do, where it's okay, I understand why we sort of feel weird about these things because it's awkward.
It is awkward. Do you think it's awkward also because we almost put a self-worth with our money? Is that what you saw?
Yes. I mean, we definitely do that. We definitely put a lot of self-worth with our money. And there's also so much everyone's different. I was thinking about that a lot recently. The thing about personal finance is that it's personal and everybody we come with so many different stories and emotions and experiences and privileges that make up who we are with our finances. And then the personal finance industry is just like, save this amount and spend this amount. And they make it so clinical when it's not. It just isn't.
I once saw a review on my book where someone said, I wish, Sim, you had just given us like percentages, like save this percent, spend this percent. But I just don't think it works that way.
No, I don't think it works that way either. And people really do want just like a clear answer. And it's like, it's so much squishier than that.
What did you see when you were doing the Money Diaries? Were there like certain patterns that kept coming up or things that you were surprised by? And when you were, I guess, getting to peek inside women's finances, not a lot of people get a chance to see such a breadth and depth of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I joked at one point, it felt like if you were like a 27-year-old marketing manager, it didn't matter if you were in Dallas or Chicago or LA, you were spending the same money on the same things. Everybody was going to, at the time, SoulCycle and buying smoothies and spending on these very like rote things. So the thing that I think is really interesting is that there's only a certain amount of things that we spend money on, right? We all sort of have the same expenses. The difference is depending on how much you make, sort of like it expands or contracts, how much you can spend and how you feel about that expense.
What are the things that you felt everyone was spending money on?
Housing, groceries, dining out, transportation. Usually some people have some sort of debt that they're paying off, typically student loans. Your pets, your kids, clothing, getting a haircut, going to the gym. Those sort of are inevitable and everybody spends on them.
And was there things that you found surprising?
Rarely. I think that like maybe one of the most surprising things about Money Diaries is that I find these to be endlessly fascinating, but the reality is that most people don't have some like secret exciting expense. Most people are spending the same money on the same things.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What did you find with the salaries?
Salaries were all over the place. I run a series now in my newsletter, The Purse, called Home Economics, which is similar to Money Diaries in a lot of ways, but it doesn't track a week. It's more of an overview. And the thing about salaries is that, and these stories, is that with Money Diaries and with Home Economics, readers are always very eager to see how high earners spend their money.
Yes.
And less interested when the subject has a smaller salary.
Yeah.
And that continues to be a thing. And yet then they complain in the comments when I share stories of high earners because
it's not relatable anymore.
It's not relatable. And I think that it's not relatable. It's just there's an element of jealousy. And I get that. Like it's an element of like, I'm not there. I'm not that successful. And it makes me feel bad. But it's interesting to me that there's always that pushback. It's like, well, I know that's not you know, what you say and what you do are two different things when it comes to readers.
I would love to dive a little bit more into the responses and the reactions. I mean, it sounds like some people felt very strongly about some of the stories. Yeah. Do you think that's also why we're scared to speak up?
Yeah, definitely. Because when you do speak up, you're sort of punished for it, right? Like people go after you in the comments and say, the Money Diaries comments, it's funny, when it was sort of at its peak, New Yorker did an article that said the comment section was one of the darkest corners of the internet.
Oh,
which
really?
Was so funny. But I think it does really reflect back how we're very critical of ourselves and each other about how we spend our money.
What are your thoughts then on like financial transparency? I imagine that you're all for it. I'm all for it. And I'd like to think that, you know, everyday women that listen and go, yeah, I want to talk about money with my friends and family. Yeah. I want to be able to ask my friend, how much was your house? And did your parents help? But how do we actually do that in real life?
I think a lot of it's about building trust, right? You don't have to tell everyone everything. I really believe in financial transparency, but I also feel like we don't owe everybody everything, right? You don't have to tell your nosy neighbor how much they spent on their house. They can look it up on Zillow. Like it's not that hard. It's not that hard to like discover what your neighbor spent, right? And I think that more than anything, it's a lot about showing our values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what we spend on often comes down to what we value most. And so I think that with friends, it's often explaining like, this is why I did this and this is why I made this decision. And I think by having those conversations can be really empowering.
So do you mean like rather than just saying this is what I spent, it's I really value traveling. And
Yes.
that's like more of a value for me than saving up for a home. And therefore we did a big like 3-month trip and this is what it costs. Is that what you mean?
That's exactly what I mean. Or living in this neighborhood was really important to me because I wanted my kid to go to this school. So we decided to prioritize living here and we're not driving as fancy of a car. Or I really want to eat organic. And so we cook all our meals at home. So thanks for inviting me to this expensive brunch, but it doesn't work with what we want to do. And I think starting to have those conversations and normalizing sort of that decision-making process was really helpful in the conversations about money.
And what about the flip side? How do you have those conversations where you want to say, I don't want to talk about this without seeming like you're gatekeeping or you're a bad friend?
Yeah. I mean, I think you just have to sort of say like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't know. It's really funny with transparency because I think that it needs to be earned. Like you can't just expect people to like share everything. And I feel very lucky because, and maybe you feel like this as well, people tell me a lot. And I think that's because I'm a safe space. I'm not a friend. Mm-hmm. I'm essentially a perfect stranger. And so when I do interviews with women, they often share things that they would never share with friends or family or even their spouse because I'm just a safe place. And so I think that when you're thinking about the relationships that you have with your friends, and if you want to be more open about money with them, you need to create a very safe space. My friends and I joke, it's the tree of trust, right? Like what you say in that circle needs to stay in that circle. I also think you have to read the room to a certain extent, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're going to have friends who are more successful than you and friends who are less successful than you. And maybe like complaining to your friend who's struggling with a financial problem about like a small thing that's bugging you. Like you need to like be considerate of where your friends are coming from too.
Do you feel like it is better in those instances to not speak about money with those friends, or how would you navigate that?
Or just change what the conversation is and how you're approaching it? Because I always think that those conversations are important, but maybe the conversation's focused more on saving or smart buys or different ways to be frugal versus like complaining to a friend that like you wanted to buy a handbag and it was $4,000 and you only had $3,000 in your budget. You know, that's also like a totally relevant thing to complain about sometimes, but you're not going to want to complain to your friend with credit card debt about that problem. Yeah.
You don't want to be like, well, that handbag costs more than my rent. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What have you found with the readers of, your new publication? What have you kind of seen that surprised you? Has it changed the way we spend money, the way women interact with money since, your earlier days at Refinery? Or does the consumer culture just stay the same?
No, I think it's changing. I think more people are talking about it openly than there was when I started working at Refinery 29 and really running Work and Money and Money Diaries in earnest around like 2014 through 2016 was sort of like the beginning of all of that. I think TikTok and Instagram and podcasts there's all these new mediums and platforms where people are talking about it. And I think that it is changing. It's struggle. And I think it's always going to be in struggle unless there's like some radical change in our society, which perhaps will happen. But
what do you think would need to change?
What would need to change? Oh, so many things.
Where do we begin?
We begin?
Don't have enough time.
Yeah, I don't think we do.
That's very fair. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk a bit more about your views and experience on sort of income and women saying, hey, look, I want to increase my income. I know that, Money Diaries and a lot of publications that you look at, CNBC Make It focuses on how much we spend. Mm-hmm. But do you think we're not giving enough time to the salary aspect of actually increasing the top dollar and everything else kind of falls?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up because I've been thinking a lot about salary and money lately. It's going to be 2 years now. I left my job at Fortune 2 years ago and took a huge pay cut to make that move, to start my own thing, and sort of not realizing in the process, but created a better work-life balance for myself. And I have been really sacrificing financial security for like emotional security, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting. I definitely go through periods where I think a lot about like, I would like to earn more now, and that's where I'm going to turn my attention. And this has been a period of like, okay, that earning more is not as important to me as having time to create something that I care about. But I'm doing that from a place where like my husband has a full-time job and health insurance. And if I was in a different situation, it would be a totally different conversation. I do think that when we talk about debt and spending and cost of housing and all these different competing things that we want, that being realistic about salaries and earning more is really important. And that's a really tough place to step into because there's so many competing challenges, especially facing women when it comes to earning more money, especially when they hit sort of their child rearing years, where like there's all different reasons why it maybe not the time when they're going to be making peak money.
Do you mind expanding on that more? That's I think a really good point.
Yeah, I think, a big part of it, especially in the US, is the cost of childcare is just outrageous. There's the motherhood penalty where women often face, a salary peak that they hit and then see their income decline as they have children. And it's hard. Our society is not built for two parents to work outside the home and raise kids. The school day starts and ends not in the time that we go to work.
Right?
Yeah.
Who designed that?
My son is off school so much. It's crazy. We were counting down. I think there's 38 days between now and the end of school, but he only goes to school 24 of them or something like that. Actually discovered that I had a day off, and it turned out that I was wrong. He didn't have that day off, and I was like the best. Like, I feel like it was like found money. It's like I don't have to find a childcare. I don't have to like take time off of work. So it's so challenging to juggle it all, and it's such a big mental load for moms. I have a great partner, but ultimately, like at the end of the day, I'm the one chasing down the doctor and making the appointments and organizing camps and doing so many of this sort of life maintenance things that just take up so much time. I was up at 10:30 last night organizing the readathon for the PTSO. So it's nonstop. So I think that, 5 years ago, even if you had told me that I would be at a place where I was like, not leaning back, but shifting gears, I would be like, what are you talking about? Like I'm go, go, go. And I am focused on making as much money and climbing the corporate media ladder to the very top. But I think women often get to a point where they're like, something's got to give. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's their careers. The good news, I think, that I hold on to is that, and the thing that I always say is that careers are very long. Mm-hmm. And the key is to remember that our kids' lives are fairly short, that they are home and intensely in need of our attention is brief.
I completely agree. I was listening to a father on a show talking about this, where he said, you think you have 18 years with them, but for the first 3 years, they're kind of just these blobs. Yeah. So you're not really chatting. Mm-hmm. And then for 14 to 18, they have friends. Yeah. They want to hang out with them. So you actually only, have like maybe 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And it's really refreshing to hear a perspective of someone who, has done the extremely amazing corporate thing and then has decided that for this period of time, there's going to be a shift. I think a lot of us are going to either face that or are currently getting close to facing that. How do we deal or decide, what gives when it's we can't have it all. So when you're choosing, how do you figure it out?
How do you figure it out? A lot of hard conversations, trying not to make yourself feel bad if you change your mind and change your mind again. I think that we need to remember that's one of our prerogatives, is to say, like, this works for me now, but it might not work for me next week or next month or next year. And I have the right to change my mind and do something different. And then I think a lot of it has to do with like building a really good financial foundation, right? Like one of the reasons that I'm here and able to do this is that I saved like crazy when I was young. And even when I was making more money, I was saving a lot of it and investing it. And that gave me a cushion that I could take this risk. And so I think that that's really important, and something that doesn't get talked about enough is the financial privilege.
That's very true. Do you remember roughly how much you were putting aside for the people that will want to know?
Oh my gosh. I mean, for a long time, my husband and I would live on one salary and spend one salary. So we'd saved a lot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But that is, again, the privilege of being a 2-income household, right?
That's true. But also very incredible. You don't have to save just one entire salary, but you've chosen.
That was about what we got by on.
What is your advice to women that are wanting to take a career break, but it almost feels like this unspoken rule that you don't do that if you would want to take your career seriously? It almost feels wrong to say, I just want to take some time off. And not even time off. I want to take time to do other things.
To do other things, right? God, I guess it's certainly not time off. I am a big fan of Neha Rush, who does Mother Untitled, which is a community for women who are looking to lean out and downshift and think about their career. She refers to it as the gray area, which I really love. So I think that there are increasingly great networks out there. And I would say just do your research. And then I think looking at the financial picture is a big piece of it. My husband and I met with our financial advisor before I decided to take a break. And I don't know why I say take a break. When I decided to leave my full-time job,
it's not a break.
It was not a break. It is not a break.
You are not on a resort.
No, I work maybe more than I used to. When I decided to leave my full-time job, we sat down with our financial advisors and they sort of gave us a big picture and said, you know, if you shift this here and if you think about this and if you have this emergency fund, like you'll be fine. Like you can continue to save. And so having a number in mind that we're trying to reach every year also makes it easier for me to prioritize what we're spending and saving.
So if someone's getting close to that career pause, what are the things they have to think about? So how did you decide? It was first the conversation, I imagine, or conversations with your spouse?
Yeah, lots of conversations and him being like, no, that's a crazy idea.
Oh, really?
And now actually he's much more, because, once a month, once a quarter, I'm like, should I go back and get a full-time job? Like, is it time? And I take on a lot of freelance work on top of the purse that makes it possible to do everything that I do. And, he's always like, no, like, I think we're okay, that we're in a good place. So much of it is open conversation. And then we did have to like pull back on a lot of spending, right? Like, it's not like we're spending the way I was when we were both working full time.
And how do you have that conversation? Like, how do you decide like, hey, it's going to be less holidays this year, or it's going to be,
I'm really lucky because I have a husband who doesn't like to spend a lot of money. Like his like default mode is like not spend, and my default mode is like let's spend. And so it was me that had to have conversations with myself. That was like, okay.
It was you with the mirror.
Yeah, that was like, no, you can't buy clothes the same way that you used to. But I also was somebody, and I've written about this in the purse, like where I found that I was spending a lot to sort of numb the unhappiness that I felt in my career at the time. And so leaving that job made it just easier to not spend because I didn't have quite that same like feeling. I'm such a person who needs a treat. Like, I have a bad day, I have a good day, I have a win, I have a loss. Like Lindsay needs a treat. So leaving a bad job really was such a revelation that a lot of that need that I felt to spend sort of just disappeared.
What were the treats? Like, were these like actual sweet treats? Or were they like clothes?
Everything. Clothes, like a lot of clothes. I redecorated my apartment during the pandemic because like, what else are you going to do? And what a way to like dull the pain. But it would also be like, I need a coffee. I need a really nice lunch today. I need to go out to dinner with friends.
It reminds me of Your Money or Your Life, which I'm sure you've read or heard of. And for those that haven't, it's an incredible book. And she speaks on, a lot of what we spend is actually related to our jobs. And that fear of retiring and not having as much money actually comes from the fact that the clothes we spend, eating out, all these things we do to numb actually go away when we don't have to have that worry.
It's amazing.
I love that. And so you've had that conversation. You've had the conversation with yourself in the mirror, spend less money. And then how do you deal with the identity shift?
Oh man, the identity shift's the hardest part.
Yeah,
it's much easier to stop spending than it is to stop saying you're executive editor at Fortune magazine. Yeah, I'm still working through it. I'll let you know when I figure it out.
What have you been able to work through for those that are worried about it?
Yeah, I think it's a natural worry because you worry about your relevance in the world. A friend said to me, she's like, you're worried that you're not going to be relevant anymore. My friend Hauser, who she's an amazing writer and speaker, and she has this great book, Myth of the Nice Girl, that I adore. And she was a big-time executive at Time Inc. and then ultimately left and has done so many different projects and is arguably more well-known and more successful now that she's no longer an executive. And she was really an inspiration to me and continues to be. And frequently reminds me, like, you still matter in this world, right? We are not just our jobs and our job titles, but also I continue to do work I really care about and have created something new that I really care about. So these days it's just reminding myself of that and then getting to be better about speaking about what I do. Yeah. Not just writing it off as like a little newsletter, but actually, a community that I'm building.
Exactly. I mean, like, if I was you, I'd be walking around like, I invented like Money Diaries, and now I've moved it off into my own amazing publication. And isn't it more exciting to be able to say that than
in theory? But thank you.
I think also this is a very Western way of how we all operate, regardless of, if we're from New Zealand or the US, but we size each other up by our job titles.
Yeah.
And you go to a conference and it's like, what do you do for work?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost as if what you say then determines if the other person wants to keep talking to you or not.
Yeah, it's true. It's really true. And we're so much more interesting than that, right?
Yeah.
Than just our job titles?
I appreciate when people ask me other questions, but I get perplexed with what to answer.
Yeah. About other things that you do.
Like, I hate the question, what do you do outside of work? It's like, well, I wasn't planning on answering this.
No. I know. It's something we all need to rehearse, right?
It's something we all need to rehearse.
It's funny that you say that. I took a class through City University of New York a couple of years ago, and it was a great program for entrepreneurial journalists, and I worked on developing the purse in the class. But we were on this networking call, and it was me and 3 men. And the professor asked, what are your hobbies? And it's like, hobbies? I am a mother. I am trying to stand up a business. I have gone back to school. I don't have a lot of time for hobbies. And so one of the things that I really like to do is I really like to resell my kids' clothes. I know that's like a really weird thing, but I love to do it. I love the community aspect of it. I love the like small income I make from it. I love the upcycling, the sustainability. Yes. So I was like, that's my hobby. And he was like, I was really looking for like, I like to paint or I like to bowl or I like to, and I was like, no, this is my hobby. And I'm going to stop feeling like ashamed and weird about it. And like, you also shouldn't be making people feel ashamed and weird about it. And like, let's move on.
I guess he probably also was wondering, like, is there a hobby you're not monetizing?
A friend of mine said recently that I needed to find something to do that wasn't productive. Yes. And I appreciated that. But also like, that's hard.
That is very difficult.
Type A people finding something to do that's not productive is challenging.
It's like, what do you mean every aspect of my life is not meant to shape my identity to the outside world?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm really enjoying chatting about, the career pause. Some of the fears that a lot of women have around this is, what about, like, will that just mean my career dies once I come back? Like, whether it's taking a pause to have children, taking a pause to raise children. Oftentimes women have the privilege and also the kind of burden of taking care of their aging parents. Sometimes those are pauses, health reasons of taking care of other people. How do we navigate the fear of what will life be like if and when I go back?
That's a really great question and one I'm still trying to figure out myself. I think that the reality is that you can go back. And like I said at the beginning, careers are very long. And I have so many great examples of people that I know who, for one reason or another, might have downshifted or changed career paths and are thriving now. So I don't know where we came up with this narrative that like if you take a pause, if you focus on children, if you launch a new business, that just like that's the end. Like I'm not sure where we got that. Like who are our examples of, because I have that same hang up, but like who is my example of someone who like never had a career again? My mom is a pharmacist and she worked most of my childhood, but definitely had periods of time where she downshifted or she took a break, and she ended up in her 60s, you know, reaching the highest level within her profession of running a pharmacy at a hospital.
Oh, wow.
And she's a good reminder to me that like careers are long, like epically long, like 40 years. And for us, they may be even longer because we're going to be living longer. So this idea that we're going to retire at 65, like you might retire at 55 and then go back and do a whole new profession at 65 and work that for another 20 years. We just don't know. So I think we all need to figure out a way to move away from this idea that like making a decision at 30, at 35, at 40, at 45 is going to be that's like it for the rest of your life, because it's not. Hopefully it's not. It's just the beginning or a new chapter.
That makes me feel very relieved, because I think I agree. I think it's such a strong way of looking at it. And one of the real struggles that we find our community have is they say, well, how exactly do I financially plan for this pause? Like you said that you and your husband spoke to a financial advisor. Like what were kind of the steps that you took? Was it, you said there was like a number. Was that like an investment number that you had?
An investment number that we have so that we could continue working towards our retirement goals, which, you know, the beauty of compound interest and having done this for a long time is we have a nice nest egg. So at this point, it's sort of just like feeding kindling to the fire, right? And then like ignoring when the market goes crazy and you're like, what is going on? It's just like putting blinders on and saying like, this is not money we need right now. This is money for the future. I also spent a lot of time looking at our finances and seeing what we're spending every month and like what could we spend less on? What could we cancel subscription wise? What are areas that we could tweak? You know, like if we were eating out 3 nights a week, do we only eat out 1 night a week? You know, I wasn't going into the office anymore, so I wasn't going to be buying lunch every day. That was pretty significant savings. So a lot of it was just really being honest with myself. I'm not a budgeter per se, but I kind of always know what's coming in and what's going out and how much we're spending at any given time and how much is required to live my life. And so I think that that's another number that people need to know, like how much do you need to live your life?
And what's like a good average for, and probably not someone in New York because that's a very high number, but, you know, should we be putting aside like 30,000 a year? Is that quite normal in terms of spending if you're on a career pause?
I mean, I think it's individual. It's how much is your rent or mortgage, how much is your transportation, what are you spending on groceries, utilities, those, like, it's hard to give, you know, going back to you saying that your readers wanted you to give percentages. It's super hard to say a specific number without like knowing a person.
And if you could give all the women listening to, which is, you know, big ask, but if you could give all the women listening, you know, your main takeaways with what you've seen in your career by being able to see so much of our personal money journeys, what is just something you wish we were all doing more of?
I wish we had more confidence about how we managed our money. That would be the biggest thing. And even going back to my younger self, I would say have more confidence, learn about this more early and pay attention, because it's so powerful if you learn it when you're young. And I think that if we all had more confidence to have the conversations, to ask for the raises, to actually save the money, to think about what we're spending and why, it's very easy to get caught up in just like, this is what everybody else does, so it's what I should be doing too. I think that would be the biggest thing, is just to have more confidence. And to get that confidence, you just need to have education. And you're probably getting education because you're listening to your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I think that was a very beautiful answer and such a great way to wrap up the episode. For those that want to learn more about you, to support the newsletter and your articles, where can we find the purse?
You can find the purse on Substack. It's just thepurse.substack.com. So easy to find. And then we're also on Instagram too.
And what is the Instagram handle?
That I don't know.
We'll add it to the description. You should know that.
I know I should know that.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. This was
Thank you so
incredible.
much. It's been really fun.